Hi team, and welcome back to the Introduction to Japan Anchor Fact series of mini lessons and printables. This is lesson 3, Japan and China. Although we have learned that Japan is a very xenophobic culture, there is one culture that Japan has been linked to throughout its long history. One culture that it was willing to learn from because it was more ancient and had wisdom to offer, which the Japanese were willing to accept. That culture is China. We have seen that the first emperor of Japan, according to Japanese legends, was Jimmu, and we saw that the Japanese believe he was the child of the sun goddess Amaterasu. Even though this is part of the Japanese religion, called Shinto, it did not mean that the emperors would necessarily be able to rule Japan. Being a ruler is a practical problem, even if you are supposed to be divine. The first ingredient that is needed for a successful monarchy is charisma. The word charisma comes from an ancient Greek word meaning a favor. A person with charisma is especially favored by the gods with energy and leadership skills. He commands others, and they follow willingly. The first king in every country has to have this. He has to convince people that he is the right person for the job, usually by violence and conquest. But charisma is not enough to sustain a kingdom. Once a charismatic monarchy is created, the next practical problem for the ruler is to pass on power to the next person, which almost always means the king's son. This can be a very delicate step. The ruler must have the charisma to convince the aristocracy to accept his son. The aristocracy, in other words, meaning the other leaders of society. He must convince them that it is better to have a hereditary monarchy instead of starting over and perhaps having the aristocracy fight each other in order to decide who's going to be next. Jimmu succeeded in this step, and the Yamato dynasty was born. Of course, it must have helped that the Yamato family was considered divine. This means that the divine spirit of Amaterasu was literally flowing through their veins. But having a hereditary monarchy is no guarantee of long-term success either. Once you have a hereditary monarchy, where power is passed from generation to generation in the same family, the next challenge is to organize the government so that it actually does the job it is supposed to do. This third step is called bureaucratic monarchy. In order to perform this next step, Japan's rulers turned to China. Why China? Because China had succeeded in creating a bureaucratic monarchy before any other kingdom. China was the middle kingdom of East Asia, from which everybody else was willing to learn. Bureaucratic monarchy was the outcome of the teachings of the Chinese teacher Confucius, as we saw in our Anchor Fact series on China. The teachings of Confucius, when compiled together, form what is known as Confucianism. Circa 552 AD, the leaders of the Soga clan in Japan proposed to adopt Confucianism in order to organize the Japanese government. This was a wise idea. Along with it came Chinese writing, which was adopted and modified into Japanese writing. But there were two problems. One was that China also had Buddhism, which is not the same as Shinto. So anyone who wanted to be a Buddhist might not be as loyal to the Japanese emperor. The second problem was that the Soga clan seemed to be so strong that they might want to take over Japan for themselves. Let's stop for a moment and clarify what a clan is. It's a large, extended family. Like in Europe, groups of families together formed a clan, and usually ruled over some large area. In Europe, these clans also combined into something larger called tribes. But in Japan, however large the groups got, they were known as clans. In a terrible moment in Japanese history, the leader of the Soga clan, who had proposed the adoption of Confucianism, Soga no Iruka was his name, was killed by the other clan leaders in front of the Empress of Japan. This is known as the Ishii Incident. This stopped the Soga clan from taking over Japan, assuming that's what they wanted to do. But the ideas of the Soga clan were too important to abandon. Chinese writing, Confucianism, and even Buddhism spread far and wide in Japan anyways. Was Soga no Iruka a hero or a villain? I don't think we will ever know. Because of him, however, Japan evolved into a bureaucratic monarchy, and this was an important step in the rise of Japan. In fact, the ruling Yamato family went on to become the longest dynasty in the history of the world. As we know, there has only been one dynasty in Japan. This is mainly because of Shinto, but it is also probably thanks to Soga no Iruka for teaching Japan about Chinese culture. Next time, we will see the one other formula for success of the Japanese emperors. Don't forget to go to the Knowable World website for the full printables package and this entire series available on demand. The printables are packed with quizzes and activities that will help you learn the story, including a printable timeline that matches the one you are seeing in these lesson videos. See you next time.